Thank you everybody for being here tonight. Astrid, my name's Astrid, and beside me is Jerry from Expats Portugal. And we've got the lovely Sarah here today to talk about money exchange. So yeah, let's get on with the show.
Okay, let's do that, Sarah. We have a recording recently up on the Expats Portugal YouTube channel, which is the 3 steps to currency confidence, which is a really nice primer, an introduction for people in about 20 minutes there. We're going to deep dive into those 3 steps this evening, and I think you want to elaborate on those. Should we go through them first of all, top level? Number 1, exchange rate and rate movements. Number 2, options, bank versus broker, online services, etc. And 3, planning. Those are the 3 basic areas. Let's start with number 1, shall we? And let's take it a bit deeper than when we first talked on that recording that I spoke about, which people can look, not right now, but at a later date. So let's deep dive into currency confidence this evening. Good evening to you.
No problem. I'll start by sharing my screen. Let me do that so you can see some graphs. I always think that's kind of nice looking at visually. So really, the purpose of the exchange rate and exchange rate movements is a lot of times people will be thinking about, can I get the best rate on the day, which is very important. So obviously do your comparisons. You think about using your bank, double check what rates that they're giving you. And then obviously why we exist, because we can give better rates than the bank and other providers and make it cheaper for you. But that's just one aspect of the exchange rate. You're looking at it just as and when you need to do it, when actually exchange rates do move quite quickly. And also speaking to a lot of expats, Portugal members, your timeframes vary between sort of 6 months for you to actually move to Portugal. And often we're finding as well, things can perhaps move more quickly than people expect. But actually looking at the exchange rates, that will really impact the amount that you transfer much more than what's the rate against one provider and another. So to make it a little bit more relevant for today, I've got a US dollar euro graph here. Couple of things to point out. Yes, we've seen a little bit of weakness at the moment, mainly driven to the inflation data that came out today. It was actually better than expected. So it shows that the interest rate hikes that the Fed have been doing, the aggressive ones that they've been doing, have been working really well. It does look like they will still have to raise rates again in December, because at the moment inflation is at 7.7%, but they really want to get it down to 2%. But because this has been positive, they'll do it at a bit of a slower pace. Now, that's great for businesses and the economy, but not so great for the exchange rate. The dollar strength needs higher interest rates. And the thing to watch out for when we're looking at what moves the market, we'll talk a lot about different data that's coming out, comments that people make, and perceptions in the market. So to give you an example, in December, when they go to raise rates again, if they do it at 25 basis points, then it's against expectations, and that could weaken the US dollar. If they do it at 50 basis points, then that's expected. So there's less likely for any rate movement. If they do it by 75 basis points, then that would be positive for the US dollar. And again, when they make any interest rate announcements, they will then come out and make comments. And it's those comments that we listen to. And also when I talk about what the market perceives as happening, they see this as positive, the inflation data. So what will happen is, instead of being adverse to investing in riskier assets, they will go ahead and do it. So they'll pull out of the US dollar, which is a safe haven currency. So we may see some more US dollar weakness on the back of that. So there's quite a number of elements that we look at when we look at the exchange rates. And that's the other thing why it is important that people do speak to us, because there's a lot going on. It can be very stressful when you move country, and we can keep you updated with what's happening, anything that's coming out. So, for example, you've got anything could happen with the Ukraine-Russian war. There's cost of living crisis, threats of recession. There's lots that can impact the markets. And a lot of certainly American customers have been buying their euros in advance because the rates, as you can see from this graph, have been very good. Now, some are saying, oh, well, actually, because of the weakness, maybe it's the rates aren't very good at the moment. Yes, we have seen the weakness, but that's the other reason why I really wanted to show you this graph, is not to just necessarily look at things in a short term and have that sort of tunnel vision. You've got to look at it in a much wider range, because that will actually show, as it shows in this graph, that the rates are still very good. So even though we've seen a bit of weakness and you're not getting the highs that you were before, it is still very good at good levels. And again, think about in your time frames. You know, if you started your journey 12 months ago, 6 months ago, the rate is much better than what it was, and you're able to buy more euros, essentially.
Yeah, and that's why recommendation number one is to keep an eye on this. Keep an eye on the rates, even if you're not going to be moving soon. It's good to get into the habit of keeping an eye on the rates and the movements.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that we've possibly got some other, we deal with countries all around the world, customers. So if you're in the UK, if you're in Canada, and you've got Australia, so I don't know who's on here tonight. So I thought I'd just touch on some of those other currency pairings, just in case you're on here tonight. So again, similar with the Canadian dollar, similar, they are forecasting a bit of a slowdown in the Canadian economy. The federal government came out with their fall statement saying that they're concerned for business investment in Canada, and it's really having an effect now and could in the future. So that's something they're really going to focus on, because what should have happened really is that when the Russia invaded Ukraine, that the Canadian dollar would have performed better should that happen, because of the commodity price and demand for oil. But again, if you look at it from a longer time period, we're still at, as I said, still at good levels for selling Canadian dollars and buying euros, even though we have dropped off those highs. So again, it's important just to be watching the rates of exchange, because sometimes when you're waiting for a 1% improvement, it could move 4 or 5% in the opposite direction. Is it worth that risk? I said nobody's got a crystal ball, but what we do is, as I said, we look into a lot of things that are happening and we keep you updated. So the best thing to do really is, if you do get registered with us, which is free, and you do speak to us, we can just keep in contact with you and just keep you updated with what's happening. Because what often happens is the rates can move very quickly. And when that happens and you're not in a position to buy your euros, then you may miss out on that rate movement, or it's moving against you, and then it could become more expensive, essentially.
Excellent. Okay, thank you very much. So I think you've got another graph for us.
That was just Australian dollar buying euros, in case anybody was on from Australia. So again, we've seen that. So in this scenario, yes, it's not the same as Canadian dollars and US dollars. But what you could think about is that actually it is falling, that maybe by buying your euros now, it's not going to become more expensive. Having said that, what's really one of the things that is driving weakness in this Australian dollar is China. They've got this really strict zero COVID policy, which is really impacting. It's kind of one of the main trading partners with Australia. So if that improves, then that will help the Australian dollar. But again, similar with the Ukraine and Russian war, nobody knows how long it's gonna last for.
But keep an eye on things. That's the important takeaway here at this stage, isn't it? Is to keep an eye on what's going on. Any impact from the midterm elections that you're aware of? Yeah,
interesting. So obviously it's a lot in the news and it's very topical at the moment, but it doesn't appear to be really impacting the rates that much. Obviously, if the Democrats do win the Senate, then we may see some US dollar weakness, because it will make it difficult for Biden to enact any significant policy changes. But it does seem that the markets are focusing a little bit more on the data that's coming out. We've got US GDP growth figures next. So again, that's something to watch out for, because they'll be looking for any indication of whether there is going to be a recession in America.
Okay. All right. Excellent. So yes, keep an eye on those rate movements. By opening an account with Spartan, you can stay in touch and chat, basically, rather than pushing it down the road and thinking about it later on, or kicking it down the street. Get into communication and get into awareness about the changing rates, because it can actually be very considerable, can't it? The saving, if you make the right sort of decision, and conversely, if you make the wrong sort of decision. I think you've got a great illustration of that, Sarah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things to bear in mind again is looking at it in a bigger picture, because, as I said, your timeframes are a lot longer, and there is more to consider. And one of the great examples that I've seen recently is actually thinking about rate movements and house prices. So the second quarter data is out. The house price index has shown that house prices have increased in Portugal by 13.2%. But in January to now, November, the US dollar euro exchange rate has improved by 13.4%. So it's really helped to negate some of those price increases. I mean, unfortunately, we don't have Q3 data out yet, so that might change. But having said that, it would still probably help to negate some of those price increases. So again, it is thinking about the exchange rate and how that can impact transfers, or, you know, you're worrying about house prices increasing. People are worried about their budget in as far as, you know, extra costs that suddenly they come across. I know some members have mentioned about things from, you know, kind of renting, and you're having to maybe pay 6 to 12 months in advance, or you might find that although it's furnished, you might want to then buy more things that you hadn't anticipated. So again, the extra cost can vary, but actually what you do with the exchange rate could actually have a positive effect on your budget and help you manage that better a little bit.
Yeah, especially with a significant move in exchange rate.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Shall we move on at this point? Because I know people will want to ask specific questions. Let's say a few hellos, actually, while we're here. Anna, good evening to you in Cascais. Heather, New Zealand. Hello. We didn't do your exchange rate. We may be able to later on, but we're talking more generally this evening. Monica from Arizona. Paul in the Algarve. The mosquitoes seem to be bigger here, Paul. Ben, good evening to you. You're in Louisiana. Great to have you, Ben. And Leslie in MI. Forgive me. What would that be? Minnesota?
Michigan.
Michigan. I do beg your pardon. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Okay,
I should know that by now.
Sorry, I should have made it clearer.
Not at all. Not at all. I do beg your pardon. Okay, we'll come back to you later, Leslie, with any specific questions, because we will throw the mics open and also stop the recording at a certain point so people can ask more personal questions. And Trevor and Shannon have been busy gleaning questions from the forum as well, which has been really helpful. So we got some specific questions that have come from the Expats Portugal forum at expatsportugal.com/community. So a lot of information tonight. And let's move on then, shall we, to step 2, stage 2 of gaining currency confidence. And that'll be the option. So basically, Sarah, how you stack up against your perceived competition, I think, here.
Essentially, yeah, there's a few things within that. So I've mentioned, obviously, you'd first think about your bank. As I said, do compare the rates, because often we are definitely more competitive than your bank. But it's actually around thinking about not just the rate, but the service that you get, the process of how you actually transfer that money. That's really what we focus on. So if you went to your bank, for example, there's a couple of things. One, you won't know the rate up front. So you won't know the exact rate until the money is actually transferred. They can give you an indication. They can give you a price there and then, but that's not, you can't lock into that rate. It's only when the money actually transfers. So that means that you're not really sure exactly how much you need to transfer to get the amount of euros that you want. So if you do want a specific amount of euros to pay for something, and if that's the case, then you might have to make another transfer. And what we find also time and time again is that a lot of the bank tellers don't really have any experience doing these kind of international transfers. So we often speak to bank tellers on behalf of customers. You know, they've phoned from when they've been in their branch. We filled in the form for some of our customers, the international form that the bank gets customers to fill in to make a transfer. So if they're struggling, then you doing it on your own might be a bit of a struggle with them. And the other thing as well is that it's not just the service side of things. You'll always be able to speak to us on the telephone. We take calls by WhatsApp if that's preferred. But there are other options available to you of actually how you buy your euros. So with a bank, it would just be a case of you need to pay a provider or you need to pay your local account in Portugal and it goes straight there. But with us, there may be scenarios where, for example, you want to buy euros now and you don't have an account or you don't have an end destination to send that money to. We have a solution for you. You can buy euros in advance and hold them on account free of charge, which a lot of people are doing because they haven't got that account set up yet. Or we can fix the rate for a future date. So all it is a 10% deposit. It's not a cost or a charge. You fix the rate and then you pay the remaining 90% when you actually need the money. So again, it's securing the price of your euros. And the benefit there really is that it might help you budget because then you know how much you're working with. If the rates are in your favor, you're looking into a favorable rate or protecting in case it does become more expensive. Also, a lot of people that buy property sometimes use that service because you then know exactly how much that property is going to cost you. It's very different than buying in your home country because you know exactly how much it's going to cost you, given a price, and then apart from extra fees of lawyers or a survey or whatever, that is the price that you pay. Whereas here, that's not the case. You know, you pay your deposit, your completion could be 6 to 12 weeks time, it could take longer, and if the rate moves within that time, then all of a sudden your property is going to become more expensive or it's going to become cheaper. And it's a similar thing really with your move. Even if you're not buying a property, you're moving sums of money that when you're coming to budget, actually that could be out because the rates moved by 2 to 3%, and on a 250,000 euro transfer, we're talking about thousands of pounds or US dollars or Canadian dollars, which can really make a difference to how much that you're working off, essentially. Oh, I can't hear Carl.
Is that better now? Can you hear me again? Because I had a problem with my sound, which I was hoping wasn't a problem to anybody else, but you can hear me again now, which is great. I think I'm on a different microphone. Basically, Sarah, is it right to say, because somebody is asking a question, I think about a specific currency, FX company, you sit somewhere between the service of a bank and the anonymous online currency platforms, right? Because you seem to have the competitive benefits of the online services, but the extra service that people would expect from a bank, not necessarily get anymore. But is it fair to say that's where you're positioned in the market?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're dealing with thousands of customers that are moving their money for various different reasons, and we deal with a lot of expat Portugal members, a lot of people moving to Portugal that are in a very similar position to you. So we've got that experience with that anyway. But also, as I said, can be quite stressful moving country. Moving house is stressful. So again, it's just one extra element that you don't need to worry about because you've got that support essentially from us. And as I said, some of the things that we do in the background around the process, for example, we check beneficiary.
No, you're not hearing me.
Hold on a minute. Let me just. I need to ask everyone to mute up again. Suzanne, you're coming in on the recording there. If everyone could mute up, that'd be fantastic. Sorry, Sarah, go ahead.
No, that's fine. So we check the beneficiary account details. If you were given beneficiary account details by email, there could be human error. someone could intercept that. So we always check beneficiary account details and make sure that they're correct for you. We're taking care of any compliance that you need to do. We're hearing that some people that are doing it through their bank, when they're sending large sums of money, the money's stopped until you provide those documents. So again, we're doing all the due diligence, everything we need to do up front for you to make sure that that process goes through. Making people aware of transfer times, and just making sure that you don't know what the transfer time is from your bank. So if you've got a deadline, factoring that in. Also, we recommend you do a small test when you send money to a new new beneficiary. So for example, if you are paying especially large sums of money, you don't want to send the full amount there until you're sure that that is the right account, that it's gone there smoothly. Because if it's not right and you've sent a large sum of money, yes, you can get it back, but it'd be quite difficult. So again, just send a small test, make sure it works before you send the larger sums of money.
Brilliant. Okay. Good evening to you as well, Carlos, this evening in North Dakota. And we have Sue in Georgia, where you're dealing with a tropical storm passing through. So all the best. Good luck with that. Fingers crossed. A safe afternoon and evening to you, Sue, over there. Dwight is in New Mexico as well. Rich, I think that answers your question. Lynn's asking, when will you have a person speaking about transferring US dollars? Well, she's right here. You may have been looking at the chart earlier on, Lynn, wondering about that. But certainly, we're talking about transferring US dollars tonight. Am I misunderstanding the question? I'll come back to you later, Lynn, to make sure I'm not misunderstanding there. Let's move on now to stage 3, step 3 of currency confidence, and talk about planning, please, Sarah, because this is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the big things that do come up. I think a couple of reasons probably why people don't realize is that when you're in your home country, whether that be America, Canada, Australia, UK, it's probably easier to make transfers when you're there in the place where your bank is, essentially. And then a lot of times people are coming across to Portugal and they're renting, and then they're buying a house later down the line. So maybe the larger transfers happening at a later date. And then what's happening is that it's more difficult to send the money when you're here in Portugal, essentially. Often it can be because the money's maybe larger sums. Smaller amounts are maybe a little bit easier because you can perhaps, online banking. But the thing is, there might be limits on online banking. We've had a customer recently who, we do see some customers have to do it anyway, where they've had to fly back to America because they've not been able to move the money. It's maybe an account that won't transfer out, or various different reasons. And the most recent one, which is interesting, was we had a customer who banks with Wells Fargo, and they've got a limit on international transfers of $70,000 every 30 days. So the person was buying a property, so obviously larger sums of money, and if she did it through her bank or transferred it, it would take about 6 months in order for them to make that payment. So she had to fly back because
that's mad, isn't it?
You've got a deadline, and that's madness.
Yes.
But yeah, we see it often, and just asking the questions, doing the research beforehand. There are things that you can do. Every bank will vary, so obviously do check with your bank. We've just seen different examples for some banks where we've heard customers give power of attorney to family people they trust. Then some banks issue you an international card reader, which I believe is free, but you have to apply for it in branch. There may be, certainly I've seen in the UK, where there's like a form that you can fill in, basically giving authorization for the larger sums of money. So again, sign that form. It may be they might ask for bank account details on there. If you're using us, then you would put the bank account details we would give you on that form, because what happens is that when you're out of the country, you've given the bank authorization to send money and you want it sent to that destination. So there's things that you can look into, or certainly ask the question. With online banking, sometimes they might be able to increase that limit. But obviously these things you need to bear in mind when you are making transfers, that if you have got any limits, you have time to make those payments, or what do you need to do before you leave America, the UK, wherever it is. Obviously UK is a bit quicker to fly back, but America is a bit further away. So again, make sure that you're doing everything that you need to do. And as I said, it is definitely worthwhile. If anything you take away is thinking about the money in advance, sooner than you thought you would be thinking about it, just so that you can plan. And there's often more options available for you.
Very good. Okay, so those, don't leave it to the last minute. Think ahead, and that's the last of the 3 steps, which I shall summarise now. First is to keep an eye. It's just the top level, to keep it really simple. The takeaway tonight is to keep an eye on the rates. Okay. Second is to be aware of the options, and if what Sarah described, how Spartan FX work, if that appeals to you, then obviously open an account with them. And do the planning. Do it now. Do it sooner rather than later, and don't leave it till the last minute, because you heard of the problem there. Only being able to move 70,000 over a long period. That to me is just crazy. It doesn't feel like it's your own money anymore when it takes that long to move money with Wells Fargo, in the anecdote that you gave. So there you go. Those are the 3 top level steps for currency confidence. Let's go into some specifics. And I get you now, Lynn. Thank you very much. The US dollars are currently in Uruguay. Let's just deal with that if we can, just to make a distinction here, Sarah. And this was a question that came in earlier on as well about euros that were in Ireland. As well as exchanging, do you move people's money from one country to another in the same currency?
Not typically, because our business is just foreign exchange currency. Okay. So if you already have euros and you need to send euros to another account, there is no need for our service. Essentially, our service is the exchange, but within that, you then get all the added extras of, as I said, watching the rates, as you said, and again, thinking about the process of sending money. Usually what happens is that it's not saying that you can't do it yourself, but often I think when people actually come to do it, they maybe find it more difficult, can be quite daunting if you're using just an online provider that you press the button when you send that large amounts of money. Because what happens is if you put in bank account details that are wrong for the person that you're supposed to be sending it to, but they are actually valid bank account details, all it will do is, that's the checks that they have on their system, is just to make sure the account exists, and as long as it exists, the money will go. So yes, you could easily by accident send it perhaps to the wrong account. Again, it's just having someone to talk to if you've got any extra questions. Your bank might ask questions. Is there any compliance documents that you need? Everything we try and do is just to make it much easier for you.
But mainly in exchange. So with Lynn and the earlier person who had euros in Ireland, they'll need to open their Portuguese bank account and move the same currency. That might be the best thing to do, but certainly that's not your territory.
No. But if you've got, we deal with customers around the world. So if you've got US dollars in another country, then we should be able to help.
Okay, so you can. All right, there's good news for Lynn right there. Okay, we'll come back to your question, Diana, and to you, Barak. Thank you very much, because we've got some other specific questions that have been gleaned from the forum, as I said earlier on, and you will get a chance to ask your own question with the mics open, everybody, in just a while. What is included by opening a free account with Spartan FX is one of the questions. Now, you mentioned that it's free to open an account. What's included in that in the service?
I think basically everything we really touched on. So yes, the key thing is to actually make the exchange, converting one currency from another. So if it's US dollars into euros, it's then to give guidance around that. As I said, people have different time frames, so we just keep you up to date with what's going on. We let you know when the rate's moving, and often, as I said, people sometimes call us and say, "Oh, things are moving a bit quicker." We like to get to know you in your full situation, because as I said, everybody's different, where your money is. So as I said, we find that people suddenly find they've got their money in an account that they find it more difficult to move from. So if you've got an account with another bank, it might be worthwhile moving it to that. So again, we try and get to know you better. And with our experience working with some different banks, certainly in America, we might be able to give you tips on which ones are better to make that transfer, or your situation might be fine. And then, as I said, it's checking any beneficiary account details, it's getting all the paperwork if any is needed, and making sure that if you have a payment deadline, that you make it on time and there's no delays as well. And then actually put the money, either we hold it for you if that's needed, or we can transfer to your own Portuguese euro account, or we can send it to any third party. So if you're paying for people use this to pay for their visa, they can pay for property, they can pay if they're renting the poor man, as long as you need a bank account, you can pay that way too. Removal company, art galleries, it really is purchasing a car, as long as they can give you bank account details. In fact, actually this week we paid someone's going on safari, and we paid their tour operator. So as a bank account we can pay to, essentially.
Excellent. Well, that's not bad for a free account, is it? And I'm thinking to myself there, we're talking about currency confidence tonight. That's currency concierge, I think. There, you're welcome to that, Sarah. If you want to use that,
because you were calling
currency concierge with Spartan Effects.
I like that. You said before we were currency counsellors, which I'm sure we probably are slightly.
I think so. A bit of counselling and a bit of concierge there with your currency. Okay. And the fees, are there any fees? Back to basics on the cost here.
Absolutely. So with us, there's no transfer fees. Okay. You may experience some transfer fees with your bank, and they will vary depending on who you bank with. But what I would say is that usually, yes, you might be charged that bank fee, but what we've saved you in the rate far outweighs that bank fee to send the money to us. No transfer fees with us. The only way that we make our money is on the rate of exchange. And how I like to explain, the simple way, is very similar to how most companies make their money when they sell products. They buy at wholesale and then they sell at a different price, essentially.
Yeah. Okay, that's what you do. Fantastic. Can you explain spread, not the dairy butter alternative, but within the currency realm? Can you explain spread and how you get paid? I don't understand that question myself, but I'm sure you do.
That's it. That is essentially the spread. Is between the price that we buy at and what we sell it to you at. That's our profit.
Oh, excellent. Okay, so you've dealt with it right there. Fantastic. And how long can you freeze a rate for? You said that people can freeze a rate, but how long can they do that for?
So to freeze a rate, you can do, as I said, you can buy euros in advance. We can freeze a rate for up to 12 months. The other thing as well is that if you book a deal with it, but if you exchange, agree to exchange money with us, for example, on the telephone, say, yep, I'd like to go ahead with that rate, that price is secured. And, I would say we're slightly flexible with that to a certain degree. Is if you're struggling to get money to us, we'll keep that open a little bit longer than I think people have experienced with some online providers, where they're quite strict on how the payment, how long they'll let you leave it before you can make that payment. So sometimes if it's delayed, they might cancel that deal. Whereas with us, we know these things can happen and we're quite flexible with that.
And it's part of the personal service rather than an automated algorithm-based time limit. Okay, very good. And I'll roll these two questions up together. How many currencies can you hold on an account? And is a bank account required in a country for each currency? So yeah, how many currencies could you have with Spartan? And does each need a different bank account?
No. So it's one, it's a multi-currency account. It's one account, and we can trade up to 40 different currencies. So I'd say we probably do cover
what?
Yeah.
Right, okay.
But to be honest, I'd say although we trade up to 40 currencies, you've got your kind of top 10 really that most, or even top 5 really, that most people trade, which is really we've covered US dollar, sterling, euros, Australian dollar, New Zealand dollar, Swiss francs, they're sort of typical ones that people are using. And then we've got some that are a little bit more exotic currencies that we can trade. But
the ones with the funny names. Okay, excellent. So no limit on that, and it's one multi-currency bank account.
Yeah, so the account is typically in your name, and you can hold, as long as we can trade it, you can hold those on account for as long as you want. It's not in a bank account as far as you'll earn interest on it, but it's more from we generally hold the money on account for goodwill more than anything, that you've not got an account set up and you want to take advantage of the rates, so we're holding your currency for you free of charge.
Sure. Well, if anyone does know of a bank account that pays interest, I'm sure other people in the chat would like to know that as well, if such a thing exists. But we get your gist, Sarah. That's fantastic. Let's go to the questions in the chat. Of course, if you want to ask a question that's not recorded, if you want to ask a more personal and private question, you'll be able to do that in a little while. But before we do that, let's say hello to Diana. Seems we have a few folks from the US on the call. We certainly do. Can you speak to the implications for factor or FBAR for US account holders of euros with your firm? What do we need to know about those regulations?
Are we talking sort of around sort of taxes? Is that with that?
I think what we might address here is taxation declarations and also money laundering. I mean, often these two come together. So can we deal with both of those?
Yeah. So I mean, money laundering, yes, we do take care of that. And as far as that's part of the reason with some of the compliance checks that we do, in as far as we check you to see who you are, and that obviously protects us and our other customers, and the reason of why you're moving the money. And banks have become a lot more stricter and do require more documentation for proof of source of funds and the proof of reason for trade, especially on larger sums of money. So we're doing all the compliance side of things to abide by anti-money laundering regulations. And as far as taxes are concerned, we don't get involved. We're a currency specialist, not a tax specialist. So you do need to speak to a specialist to get guidance on that. For us, we don't report to anybody about this information. So we don't give your details to any third party in that aspect.
Yeah.
And nor have we ever been approached by anybody. But what usually happens is that throughout the journey with us, as well as keeping you updated, we keep you updated with where your money's at. So you receive a lot of proof of that money's come in, proof that it's been sent out, like a receipt. You get lots of documentation by email that I assume customers are then keeping that as a record, so that then they can show this to whoever they need to. But we don't get involved, and as I said, we don't pass this information on, and nor have we ever been approached.
Very good. So no third party sharing there, if that's what you meant. But that's useful information anyway. Thank you very much for that. And I'm afraid we're veering into crystal ball territory here, possibly. Barack's question: we have money set aside to purchase a place in Portugal. How exciting. We have a trip planned in September of next year, that'll be 23, to look and purchase. Should we convert money now with the exchange rate, or is it too soon? Now, you don't give advice on this, do you? You can show indications, I think, but you can't tell anyone what to do with their money like this. So how would you respond to that question, Sarah?
Absolutely. I would say that just what you said about not having a crystal ball, obviously we do take into consideration a few different factors. And one of the things obviously we look at is that overall the US dollar has been very strong, and really that's not good for export. So they would want to, sometimes in the past, the US government have intervened and actively weakened their currency. We could see a reversal in the Ukraine-Russian war, which would be positive for the euro, and people would then pull out of the US dollar, but we don't know when that could happen. There's a lot of ifs and buts about certain things that might be coming out. What I would say is that a lot of customers are buying their currency now, and that's what they have been doing. Some will do it all. Others maybe will do a smaller amount or half to spread the risk.
So again, good plan,
it probably depends a little bit on your personality, perhaps, or your budget as well. You know, as I said, we are at very good levels. If you were buying your euros now, you would still be buying them at a very good price. You know, there are people that have bought their euros maybe 6 months ago, or even 12 months, 6 months ago, and the rate is better now. But in the grand scheme of things, they still bought at a very good price if you look historically.
Yeah. Okay. And maybe property prices were also in a similar ratio.
Yeah, that is the reason why I thought about that recently, is that that's the other concern people seem to be having about, you know, worrying about the house price increase. That's another question people keep asking, not obviously myself, but other experts, of should I buy property now? It's a similar thing, I suppose. The house prices are going up. Will they continue to go up? If the currency then moves against you, then you've got a double hit of price increases and exchange rate.
It's very interesting, that, isn't it? Yeah, whether to buy euros now or whether to buy the house now or both is entirely your business, Barak. But I think we've said as much as we possibly can on what can change in those dynamics. It's a great question for I'm sure that we could discuss quite a lot among us here in the chat tonight. Now, Heather asked a great question. As well as having a personal relationship with your currency counselor or currency concierge at Spartan FX, where else might people look to keep an eye on the rates, Sarah? What do you think is a useful exchange rate monitor in the public domain?
Well, on our website we have a rate section, so that you can see that there, and follow it like that. I mean, that's essentially probably a lot. There's a few different sites of very similar thing. They've got charts like that. So then you could just keep an eye on the rate and it shows if it's going up or down.
Very good.
Probably try not to become too obsessed by it equally.
Yes, yes. I'm sure that advice doesn't work in your office, does it? And of course, if you look at the exchange rates at spartanfx.co.uk on that website, you won't be bothered by other rolling news, which could be quite obsessive and depressing sometimes as well. So thank you for that. Yeah, you can do that on Spartan FX's own website there, Heather. That's a great question. Thank you. And then finally, until we throw the mics open for a little open mic, what with the recording still on, could I, where was this? This was about, we've done yours, Heather. Yeah, this great question from Diana, which I think is a really important one, because we want to make sure that Expats Portugal members are protected. Are accounts insured or guaranteed? And if so, by what means? It's a great question, Diana. Over to you, Sarah.
Yeah, absolutely. So security is obviously very important. You know, how secure your funds are and what we do in the background. So as I said, I've already touched on, obviously we abide by anti-money laundering regulations. And again, that's not just for you, but also to protect us and the rest of our customers. The other things as well is that in certain countries, you're required to have certain licenses in place. So, for example, in the UK, you've got to be authorised regularly by the FCA, and then in the US, it's FinCEN, and it's having money transmitter licenses in each state. So we've got those in place. So that means that as a company, we can legally deal with customers that are based in those countries. Equally, again, we can deal with them. Some countries we don't have to have a specific regulation to do that, but for some we do, and we have those in place for the ones that we are dealing with, as I said, especially America. The other thing as well is with the types of accounts that we have, these named accounts that I've touched on, with the regulations and the way the company set up, the accounts have to be segregated, which they are, but they're also safeguarded. So that means that all of your money is protected. It's not up to, I think with some it's up to like, I think it's £85,000 equivalent. With it's all of it's covered. So if anything should happen to us, our liquidity provider, then you'd get all of your money back straight away before the creditors came in. So that money's secure.
There you go, Diana. Great question. Thank you very much. Right. Okay. Anybody with a hands up question now? We are still recording, and there will be an opportunity for people to ask questions without the recording being on and being immortalized on the internet. But if you'd like to ask an interesting question now about foreign exchange and ask that of Sarah here from Spartan FX, please raise your hand now and let me know if there's something you think we may have missed. Robbie is straight in. Good evening to you, Robbie.
Hi. Yeah, just wondering if you haven't set up a bank account in Portugal yet and you're coming to visit or need access to money, is this a way to do it, or do you need to have your own bank? Thanks.
Thank you, Robbie.
Yeah, so no, it's not, because we don't, I think we've talked about this a few times, Carl. There's always a service that is suitable for different things, I would say, to be honest. So while obviously, I know people have touched on the whys, and yes, we can offer comparable rates, we can offer a better service or a personal service that you'll not get. We don't have a card in the same way that Wise has. So once you have an account with us, it's very transactional as far as bank-to-bank transfers, and that's what we specialize in. So if we talk about sort of larger sums, obviously the more you transfer, you will still get exactly the same price, but there's more options available. And as far as when the rate moves, it's a much bigger impact, and that's what we're kind of specializing in. But as I said, paying for visas or paying fees to people or buying a property, that sort of stuff, brilliant. That's what we offer essentially. But if you're traveling and you just need, I suppose, a currency card, then you've got a few providers out there, say Wise and others, that offer the card, that might be a better solution for you. Check with your bank or credit cards that you have, just double check the rates. I think some are better than others if you were to use your own personal cards overseas. See how easy it is to maybe get an account set up, maybe before you come or when you get here, and then you can use us to transfer money into your Portuguese account, and then you'll obviously get a card. I mean, essentially that will probably be your cheapest way, because having a card with your bank in Portugal will probably be cheaper because it's from that country that you're in.
Very good. So it's not either or,
Thanks.
is it? Thank you, Robbie. Thank you, Sarah. It's not either or. I mean, as I think you're saying this, Sarah, it's different products for different purposes.
Yeah.
So while you're traveling, it may be useful to go with an online type currency exchange, multiple account card for ease and convenience. But then for the big transfers, go with Spartan FX. Okay, any other questions then this evening before we close the public recording here? Oh, Paul, good evening to you. You need to unmute as well, Paul. It's like an okie cokey, isn't it? You put your mute button on, you put your mute button off, and here, come on, Paul.
Right. I think one of the things that Sarah's probably missed out is, we've used Spartan FX, is, and for everybody, this is the problem, is when you're moving six-figure figures across anywhere in the world through the internet, that's the worry. Where is it?
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that Spartan are brilliant at is that there is a complete record of exactly where that money is and where it's moving about. And I think they're very clear, they're absolutely transparent where your money is till it hits the bank that it's going to. And I think that's one of their biggest virtues.
Well done. You missed out, speaking of your own brilliance there, Sarah.
Oh, well, can rely on Paul, but thank you so much, Sarah, for the kind words there. But yeah, essentially, you get a full record. We have an online platform, so you can do it online yourself, but a lot of people just tend to use that like you would your online banking. You can view money in your account and see it visibly there as well. So your money, you know where it is, as Paul said, at all times. And that is a bit of the worry as well, is, you press that button, have you sent it to the right account? Is it gone in? It's gone into the ether, and then you're sort of waiting on tenterhooks to see where it turns up. So yes. Again, it's trying to avoid some of that anxiety, perhaps, and stress.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you, Paul, for mentioning that. Really appreciate it. Trevor and Shannon were nodding about that moment where you push the button. Where does it all go? Thank you for your earlier work, Trevor and Shannon, on getting the questions from the forum. Really appreciate that. I think you've got something else to add.
Yeah. It's when you're calling your bank to send the money to Spartan, and they say, if there's a mess up in this, we're not responsible and good luck. And you have this worry for a period of time until it shows up in Spartan's account, and you're kind of fretting it. But I did want to mention for the US people, I think it's the FATSA, regulations for the IRS. If you're going to be subject to those, you probably have a CPA, because those are pretty high reporting requirements. The FBAR, everybody has to do, and we did it individually, but both of us, well, I had to, because my Spartan account was in my name, but we listed our Spartan account on the FBAR reporting to the States. But it's the same thing here in Portugal for the tax returns. You have to report all these accounts to the Portuguese authorities as well. So I just wanted to make sure. A lot of people forget that, oh, I have to do this special reporting, not only in Portugal, but in the US. You have to tell them about every account you have throughout the world. Otherwise, it's a big problem. So we better, yeah. So we see people go, what? It's like, no, you fill in the FBAR, and I think it was kind of complicated doing it jointly, so we just did it individually in its electronic form. But so at least they can't say you ignored it and didn't fill it out. So,
well, thank you for including that. That's really helpful and a really good caveat for people there. So thank you for that. Did you want to add anything else? Great. That's with the FBAR then. And was it factor? But it certainly, that will make much more sense to US folks who need to do that diligent level of reporting there. Very good. I think we'll leave it there for now, and we'll turn the, we'll switch off the recording, and we can go to some more private, personal and intimate questions about currency exchanges for those people who prefer not to be recorded. And of course, you can join us for what is basically a lock-in after the webinar, and chat with Sarah and our other special guests for the Expats Portugal webinar, which we'll do now. So thank you very much so far, Sarah. Let's turn off the recording, and let's see who else wants to ask a question.